afternoon. Welcome to our show. I'm Melissa Ridgen. The award-winning show APTN Investigates has been around for 13 seasons, bringing you in-depth stories that go above and beyond what makes the news headlines each day. It's where I got my start here at APTN as an investigative reporter, so I'm happy today that we've teamed up with APTN Investigates to bring you updates on some of the stories that have aired in the past decade. Also noteworthy, Investigates is 13 years old but has already won more than 40 journalism awards in that short time. Well, let's get right into it. Last year, Kathleen Martens and Kenneth Jackson joined forces for a story called The Death Report. Three sisters in northwestern Ontario had all died by suicide within 7 months of each other, and all had at some point been under the care of Wichedaman Family Services. Internal documents relating to the death of the third sister were leaked to Crozier and Jackson. They met up with the fourth surviving sister to tell that story. Here's a preview.
Never did I think that I would, have to bury my youngest sister.
In 2014, three sisters died by suicide within 7 months of each other. Each had one thing in common: a First Nations child welfare agency in northwestern Ontario, Wichedaman Family Services. In the years since, the last surviving sister has been struggling to come to terms with all she has lost while in care.
I can't call them up and tell them my problems. I can't laugh with them. I'll never hear their laugh again. I'll never be able to hug them again.
It's no secret that Canada's child welfare system is in a state of crisis, or that it's Indigenous children who are paying the highest price. To this day, no one knows the total number of Indigenous kids in care, or how many have died there.
We have to ask ourselves, are our children not of value?
They're not in it because they care about the kids. They're in it just for a check. That's what it seems like. It always seemed like that.
Now that she is aged out of the system, Robin Lee Mathers has strong opinions about her time in care of Wichedaman Family Services and the role she feels the First Nations Child Welfare Agency played in the deaths of her three sisters.
They didn't send a counselor or anything to Sasha. They let Naya leave foster care too early. They weren't checking up on her or anything. As for Arizona, she grew up feeling angry against Wichi.
Canada's underfunding of First Nations child welfare is well known, but it's not only the federal government that's failing Indigenous children. First Nations child welfare agencies are assuming more and more responsibility over child welfare each year. And the numbers tell us they are repeating the same mistakes with the same deadly consequences.
These are lives we're talking about. This is our society, this is our culture, this is our community, these are our children.
A report from an internal investigation we were never meant to see shows a child in care who was abused, neglected, and forgotten.
People need to know the truth on how Wichedaman really is. People needed to know, what happened to my sisters.
Was incredible storytelling there. For that extensive reporting, Kathleen Crozier and Kenneth Jackson were recognized with the Michener Award. That's the highest award in Canadian journalism. Well deserved. Ken Jackson is joining us here. We've got some technical difficulties right now, so he can't come on and talk about it right now, but we'll have him on in a little bit. We're going to jump ahead to another update that we have for you. This one is still in Saskatchewan, or this one is in Saskatchewan. APTN Investigates did a deep dive into problems in the town of Kamsap. disproportionately affecting communities of Cody, Kisikoos, and the Key First Nations. People were complaining about a local doctor's opioid prescribing. Basically, people would get these opioid prescriptions, they'd sell their pills, and there was a massive drug problem hitting all three of those First Nations. The same doctor who was prescribing the opioids was also running a methadone program in town, and many people had concerns about how it was being run. Let's take a look back at that story. JD says he showed up, filled out a form, gave a urine sample, and was a methadone patient.
He didn't seem too concerned about my overall health. I think just so to say, he just came in there and made quick conversation, wrote the prescription, and was out.
APTN Investigates asked experts at a drug abuse conference in Winnipeg what they thought about methadone as a treatment for opiate addiction.
It requires a lot of background, the availability of resources, not just prescribing methadone, but all of the support services that should be associated with that. And of course, there's always the danger of someone overdosing, and methadone can kill you pretty easily.
JD says he didn't get that support. He doesn't tell you to go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings or to see an addictions counselor?
Not even. And that's actually a good point.
Okay.
That it is really a good point that there's not really a system set up like a network.
Health officials from CAMSAC traveled 6 hours to that drug abuse conference in Winnipeg with the same concern.
We have one doctor who prescribes and a pharmacist, and he has 140 patients and has a clinic 1 day a week. So we have about 140 people from in an hour, within a 60-mile radius coming to see one physician. So they're not getting the proper counseling, or they're not getting assessed properly.
Last year, the federal government spent over $223,000 for them to be on methadone. That's a heavy workload for one doctor, 1 day a week. So a year after we broke that story, this happened.
A methadone program discussed last year on APTN Investigates has been partly shut down by Health Canada. Dr. Murray Davies is no longer authorized to run the methadone program in CAMSAC, one of the busiest clinics in the province. APTN Investigates looked into allegations the clinic overprescribed opiates, then shuttled patients into the doctor's methadone program. At the time, many were concerned the clinic wasn't being run properly.
So a lot has happened since then. The College of Physicians and Surgeons, which had Health Canada pull the doctor's methadone license in 2014, they finally got around to investigating the doctor's prescribing practices in 2017. Then in 2018, Dr. Davies conveniently retired. His local newspaper did a big story about how incredible, his incredible history serving the town of CAMSAC for nearly 50 years. A year after that, in 2019, he signed an undertaking pledging to never again practice medicine anywhere in the world, which brought the College of Physicians and Surgeons investigation to a close. Okay, so now we're going to jump backwards. We do have Kenneth Jackson joining us now. Back to the death report. So for that extensive reporting, Kenneth and Cullen were recognized with Michener Award. That's Canada's highest award in journalism. So proud of them and so well deserved. Let's take a look back at their acceptance speech.
You know, I've always said this reporting is not about any one reporter or even APTN. It's about the children. It's about the care. It's about what's important.
Thank you to the Michener Awards Foundation for highlighting our work this year and the work of journalists from across Turtle Island. Masi Cho.
Joining us now to talk about the death report and what happened next is investigative reporter Ken Jackson. Kenneth, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for finally having me on your show.
We've been begging, what are you talking about? I've been begging you for years to come on here, and you're like, I'm busy, I'm investigating. You can come on anytime you want.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, take us back to how that story ever even came to be. I mean, there was a lot to unpack in that story, and it's like, where did it all start?
Well, it started in Ottawa, of all places. It started early in the pandemic. Someone I've been writing about, a young man in Ottawa who I've been writing about for a few years, was part of this First Nations agency with Chidwin Family Services up in Fort Frances area. And I've been writing about him, and he had aged out at 21, like he had aged out, and all of his funding was cut off on March 1st, 2020. And I was like, well, let's see if we can get that back for you, because you can't go out and get a job right now. The whole world just stopped, 11 days later. So people had seen my work, saw that work. We got his money back. We got a moratorium placed on other kids aging out of care. We had worked to get a mother, her child returned to her. The people in Fort Frances saw that work, and they had something called on the death report, Sasha Raven Bob's death report. Yeah. And a death report is like something, I don't think any other reporter's ever seen, because I had not seen one in Ontario ever. And I've been writing about these deaths for a long time. It's literally a blow by blow of how that child died and how the system failed her and how everyone around her failed her. And it was 90 pages, and you pick one page, you have a front page story. Yeah. So putting 90 pages into one was really hard. So that's what we did. But we also had to set out and prove and show whether or not with Chidwin, this Child Family Services, had improved since Sasha died, because 6 years had passed. Yeah. We had to see if there had been any changes. In a lot of ways, we found it didn't improve. It may have gotten worse in some areas, particularly the people in charge of everyday child welfare services through with Chidwin. And, so what we did was then we just laid it out line by line. Like Colin's an artist. He does the TV side of things, and he did his thing, and I do the investigating, and I do the writing online. And I just, I began the story quite simply where I thought it needed to begin, that they all knew she was going to die. Yeah. They knew, and they knew so, not just because she said she was going to, but because her sister had died, Shania, excuse me, one of her sisters, Arizona, had died 3 weeks prior, and prior to that, 7 months, her other sister died. So this was going to happen, and she said it was going to happen. She wrote a letter, and her worker got a call, hey, fax letter over, sees it, I'll go the next day. Yeah. There was, and then it was like too late. By lunchtime the next day, she was gone. Yeah. So that's where the story for me is everything, and why I think maybe it impacted people is that they could see, you see this beautiful young child, with beautiful eyes, just a beautiful, precious child who should be alive still, and is not, because the system and everyone around her neglected her to death. Yeah.
Yeah. We do a ton of work on child welfare here at APTN, but I feel like this death report story got attention of people well beyond our audience. Do you think that people are learning more and faster and are still surprised by what goes on in this industry? People, think, oh, child welfare, that's where neglected and abused kids go to be taken care of really well. Do you think that people are starting to realize that that is not happening?
I think what they're realizing is through your work, which has been in depth, and through mine, is that don't ask why they're in care and why they died in care. Don't ask, why are they in care in the first place? That does not matter. Yeah. What matters is once they were taken from a system that's supposed to protect them, how did that system, what protocols did they follow or didn't follow? Follow the narrative. You'll find the crime. I call it the crime in the details of the timeline from when they were taken to when they died. It should be investigated as criminal negligence, these things. These things should be seen not as a suicide, but looking at all those involved who were like, yeah. Been a long day.
And what Chidwin was, is an Indigenous CFS agency. So, we're taking back jurisdiction of our kids under C-92. Lots of people say that this is the solution to breaking the cycle of dysfunction that exists in the child welfare systems. It's going to focus on focus on the families, keeping kids connected to their communities. Death report showed us that it's not always the non-Indigenous agencies that are inflicting the trauma. It's not always the non-Indigenous workers that are the big bad boogeymen. Our own agencies are doing this. Our own social workers are doing this too. So do you see that that's going to continue under C-92, or do you see that maybe it'll be somehow different now?
Listen, I focus on Ontario, and the First Nations agencies, child welfare agencies, they call them Indigenous Wellbeing Societies. That's where the kids are dying, and they just are. And you ask why. And, you look for things, and I turn over every stone. I talk to everybody I can. I give everyone an opportunity to talk. And I still ask why. How is this possible? How do you not have the care for, or the urgency. I know you might be overrun, so is underfunding one of the issues probably? Is there, I have found that there's a lack of culture in a lot of these children's lives. Like there's like around the edges, but it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So then I go, I thought a lot about it, I look at root causes. And I come back to this thing, and it's a simple belief that safety is an illusion, and it's an illusion because safety only exists until it doesn't exist anymore, and it can turn quick. But for some First Nations children, particularly in Treaty 3, where Chittiwin is, safety is not an illusion. It doesn't exist, and they know it. Yeah. And they're waiting for their next attack, whether it be from the state, from within their communities, or inside their very homes. This hard truth, which that is surrounded by darkness. And we want to lighten that darkness with our reporting, because there's a lot of bad actors hiding in there. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to shine a light on this darkness that exists, because these kids aren't safe in some places, in some situations. Whether, sometimes they're not safe at home or in the communities or in the foster homes. Yeah. And we need to look at why, and we want to lay that truth, let truth bare as respectfully and as forcibly as possible. So we're going back to Treaty 3 for our next story, in pursuit of those that abuse children and women. Because I believe, from what I can see and those I talk to, and my opinion is based on those who live this, that sexual abuse and other forms of abuse, of neglect or whatever, but particularly sexual abuse, is a key reason why you see the cycle of grandmother, mother, children, all in care. And we got to somehow break that cycle. Like, I'm not saying that our reporting can do it, but maybe we can create a ripple, like intergenerational trauma or the hate that you see in people for the trauma that we've written about. Maybe we can create another ripple where it slowly starts to change. Yeah. And
well, it is starting to. It is starting to, and we love the work that you're doing. We appreciate the work that you're doing. It's not easy work to do by any stretch, and we are thankful that you do it. And we look forward to your next bombshell.
Right on. Thank you.
We've got many more stories to update for you from the APTN Investigates vault, so don't go anywhere.
Join our conversation now. Send your thoughts to InFocus at aptn.ca, like us on Facebook on our APTN News page, and follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus.
Welcome back. Today we are putting APTN Investigates in focus. We're updating some of the many, many stories that APTN's award-winning documentary news program has broken over the years. Our next stop is Hollywood. In 2018, John Murray took a look at pretendians in Hollywood. That's non-Indigenous actors being cast in Indigenous roles. False claims of status can cause real harm in any industry, but in the industry with the brightest lights and the biggest stage of them all, filmmakers' hands are often tied by union rules, preventing them from verifying somebody's Indigenous identity. How do pretendians flourish on the silver screen? What can filmmakers do? Those were some of the questions that John Murray had asked. Let's take a look at a clip from that story.
I should prefer to see the Aborigines. And the Indians, too. And the Indians, too. This should be most enlightening.
What makes the red man red? Teach them all about Red Man. What made the red man red?
Film and television is hard work. On either side of the camera. Actors can wait years for a dream role. And some writers never get to tell their stories. But what happens on screen reflects and shapes culture. Val Kilmer plays an FBI agent who is part Sioux. He's just one example of an actor who plays Indian for a role. Some people also play Indian in real life.
Ungrateful little brother grew up in the family circle.
The most prominent pretendian was Archibald Delaney. He called himself Grey Owl, and is still considered a cultural treasure by Parks Canada. Aaron Eyes Cody is another man who lived his life as a Native American. He even had cameos in popular sitcoms. But guess what? He was Italian. As filmmaker Jeff Barnaby points out, he wasn't the only one.
That's a phenomenon, right? People faking being Native, even outside of, like, the camera.
Well, in 2013, there was an uproar over Johnny Depp playing Tonto in The Lone Ranger. 2 years ago, a group of Indigenous actors walked off the set of a Netflix production over concerns of stereotypes and red face. Many actors and celebrities have had their Indigenous identities challenged. In 2016, APTN broke a story about Joseph Boyden's claims to a number of Indigenous identities.
Like, say you get a pretendian, and he steps to you with, like, you know, I'm such and such from, you know, this reserve, and you can't really broach that topic. I think there's specific actual rules or SAG rules where you can't sit there and say, you know, what's this and that about your race. So there's no real way to vet anybody coming in pretending to be a Native actor.
Blackfeet and Wasco actor, director, producer, and academic Merton Runningwolf shared a similar sentiment when reached by telephone.
I checked with people in law schools, I checked with people who run businesses, I checked with development offices and different tribal entities and everything else, and I asked them, I said, is it illegal to acknowledge or request proof of tribal enrollment? And they said no, there's actually federal programs that are set up to actually encourage and incentivize hiring Native Americans who are enrolled members. I'm like, that's what I thought. But the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild of America have unilaterally decided that they're going to go ahead and support this claim that it's illegal to actually even ask people if they are enrolled members.
APTN reached out to the Screen Actors Guild, who confirmed this. Tribal enrollment is the equivalent to what Canada calls Indian status registration. Wenty reminds us that identity policing is a tool of colonialism.
Because identity is such a complicated, painful thing in our communities, and we know why. The government wanted it to be that way. This is what they wanted us. This was actually a goal of colonialism, right? Was to rob us of our ability to define our own nationhoods and our own nations and our own identities.
The director of Canada's Indigenous Screen Office says pretendians tend to be weeded out by the communities anyway.
In the end, the communities tend to police themselves and sort of figure this out. And when it comes to true people who are truly being fraudulent, they tend to be called out on it.
Cringeworthy to even see some of those old footages there. So joining us now is John Murray. He's the reporter behind that documentary. Lots has happened in the few short years since you did that documentary. Maybe Michelle Latimer of Trickster fame, you know, that might be the biggest development since then. But I'm curious, you know, on your thoughts on what we've all gone through, the discussion about pretendians since you did this piece.
Well, thanks for inviting me to the show, Melissa. It's always a pleasure to come on your show. You know, a lot has happened since that documentary has aired. Although we didn't see clips of them, the 4 graduates I interviewed, they're still in filmmaking and they're just rocking the industry. Chantel Moore, one of the ones I interviewed, she won an award in 2019 at the Gimli Film Festival for her documentary, her film, When the Children Left. Yeah. But, you know, so much has happened, and with the Michelle Latimer situation, that was devastating to the industry in Canada in particular. I mean, a lot of jobs were lost when Trickster was cancelled, and you know, and that's a lot of opportunity for Indigenous talent in Canada. And you know, it's really unfortunate what happened there. And you know, this definitely needs more looking into.
Well, I was going to say, you know, I think does it seem like that Hollywood is at least a little bit more realizing that there needs to be a more truthful portrayal of Indigenous characters played by Indigenous people. Do you think that it's improving?
Well, you know, certainly there's been development since I've done the documentary. In particular, you know, Tantu Cardinal, she's just rocking the industry. She's got several film projects coming up. She's been in the television series Stumptown, portraying an Indigenous woman in an Indigenous role that seems very positive. Jeff Barnaby, he just finished well, it was more than just, I guess it was a few years ago, finished the film Blood Quantum, which was an incredible zombie film, and it was really unfortunate that the COVID crisis stopped the theater release of that, but it has been doing quite well on streaming. And speaking of streaming, another popular series has taken hold called Reservation Dogs. But it's not just Indigenous people in Indigenous roles, it's Indigenous talent.
Right.
Taika Waititi, everybody knows him as the director from the Avengers films, but he did a film in 2019 that took a non-Indigenous story set in World War II and just blew the audiences away.
Yeah. But I mean, we still have, you know, there is a character on Yellowstone that was all over the media. I think it was Adam Beach calling out saying Indigenous actors should not work with this show. They've cast an Asian actress to play the role of an Indigenous woman. You know, so it is still happening. Maybe it's time for another Pretendians follow-up documentary by APTN Investigates. I could help. I could pitch in because I'm working on something involving a very well-known Pretendian as we speak.
Yeah, and it's been an ongoing issue, absolutely. And you know, one of the names that come up when I was doing Cowboys and Pretendians was Rachel Dolezal. Now that's black, of course, and she had black identity claims, but she had documentaries, she had published papers. You know, she was a sought after person, and what we're seeing here is, and most recently with Carrie Barassa, is such a similar thing. You know, her credentials are based upon her identity, which has been proven to be, of course, false. So, you know, of course, we need to do this investigation, but it also needs caution, you know, because there are 60 Scoop survivors, a lot of disenfranchised people who really have tenuous claims to their own identity.
Yeah. John, thank you for taking the time to join us, and we will be looking forward to your follow-up on this. Let me know if I can help you out. We'll have a separate conversation about what I'm working on. This next story won a Canadian Association of Journalism Awards in 2017. It focused on the city of Winnipeg's garbage collection. It was contracted out to a company that predominantly hired young Indigenous men, many fresh from jail. Sounded like it could have been a good news story, but it didn't turn out that way. Take a look.
Hard labor, like just go all day. Like sometimes we longest shift I ever did was a 27-hour shift.
It's hard to imagine garbage being anyone's dream job. Tired?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that?
I have seen that.
You guys just like, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah, and they just walk off and come back the next day.
But all this trash is how some make a living.
We just go haul bins all day. It's always different too. It's like some days it's 6, 7 hours. Sometimes it's like 17 hours.
The bins are closed. How do you? Some of them must be fairly light, and some of them must.
Some are heavy.
Really heavy. How do you know?
Well, if it's like a fast-paced environment, you know. Like if we're going down back alleys and we want to get the job done, we're just swinging our shoulders, swinging our hips.
It's called swamping, and it can be every bit as nasty as it sounds. Day in and day out, guys heave and toss thousands of pounds of waste generated by 700,000 Winnipeggers.
You could do garbage, you could do recycling, you could be doing yard waste.
Bin after bin, mountains of trash, literally on the backs of these people.
I think of it this way, if we're not doing it then, and no one else does it, then what's the city going to look like after a while?
Over the past decade, the city of Winnipeg has moved to privatize trash collection, a move aimed to save taxpayers money. Swamping used to be a city job with decent pay, benefits, paid vacation. Now it's temporary labor for minimum wage, no benefits, and certainly no paid vacation. So in addition to that, this investigation found that a lot of those guys were getting hurt a lot. And despite workplace health and safety warnings and sanctions, nothing was solved. Let's keep watching. Clayton WIGGINS did it until getting run over on the job landed him back here. We caught up with him when he was released 8 months later. With big dreams to be a good dad to his 1-year-old son, Duke, swamping is about the only legit job he can get. Despite his accident, he headed right back here. It's a door in a back lane in a rough part of town.
After I got released, I just heard about it through just basically the streets, you know.
You go to Easy Workforce, what time in?
Well, like 6:30.
6:30 in the morning, and then what happens?
Just wait around, sit around for a job, you know. As soon as there's a job available for me, you know, I get sent out.
And is it usually?
It's usually Mterra.
But he doesn't work for Mterra. None of them do. Mterra started contracting out their drivers and made them responsible for finding their own swampers. So these high-risk, hard laborers aren't even Mterra employees. They're paid $11 an hour, and showing up here doesn't guarantee a day's work. What happens if you wait for hours and no truck comes?
Then we come back tomorrow for another truck.
So it's just a day that you've spent sitting here waiting for work and don't get it. Today, Clayton and Glenn waited 6 hours for an Mterra truck. One never came. They went home empty-handed. It's a gamble some have to make. After that story aired, Winnipeg switched garbage contractors, proving that these stories do matter, they do make a difference. Our next update goes back to 2013. Investigates executive producer Paul Barnsley heard that an American company was handing out free laptops on the Blood Reserve. Specifically, if you signed up for life insurance, you'd get a voucher for a free laptop to be delivered later. Well, if that sounds too good to be true, you'd be right. That was the title of Paul's report on the dubious deal being offered. Here's an excerpt from that.
Last May, the Saturday before Mother's Day 2013, ZW Global booked a conference room in this Lethbridge hotel and spent the day handing out hundreds of free Dell laptop computers.
The first time I heard about it was from my daughter, and she said there's laptops going around on the reserve. Ross Blackwater is the one that gives out the vouchers. I stopped him and I told him, Ross, how do you sign up for those computers, those laptops? I heard you're giving them away on the reserve.
Ross Blackwater is one of several Kainai people that are working with this American company. When they sign people up, they give out a voucher people can redeem for a free computer the next time the company reps return to Alberta. She got her voucher, but that's all. No computer yet. But the company stands to make a lot more off of her.
I signed up for a life insurance.
How much?
I think it was around $160,000.
But others were promised even more. Black Plume signs something similar to this. It promises a laptop computer, about a $400 value, and in exchange for just a bit of personal information and a signature, this. A brand new state-of-the-art house, absolutely free of charge. In very detailed documents submitted to Blood Tribe Council, the company explains how the life insurance policies will be used to finance the building of homes and communities. You're told right up front that you're giving away 95% of the insurance payout. The company will own the insurance policy on your life. Social worker Joanne Hansen told Council to look into it last year. The idea of outsiders insuring the lives of her clients troubles her.
I told them to do something about it. I had a meeting right in front, not a meeting, but they were coming out of the Ramada for some sort of chief and council meeting, and I told them, I says, this is not a cool thing.
When the deal was pitched to Council back in 2009, the talk was of million-dollar houses and even entire senior-friendly communities.
Did Council enter into an agreement?
No, absolutely not.
Was there a reason why?
Well, we just weren't sure. Like, it was just too good to be true, right?
So with this former Blood Tribe councillor saying he believes ZW Global's plan for free housing on the reserve is just too good to be true, we decided to check it out. This is the man behind ZW Global, Dr. William Rowe Lenhard II, Ph.D. The ProQuest database contains more than 90% of Ph.D. dissertations submitted to accredited post-secondary institutions in the United States and from colleges and universities in Europe and Asia. And there is no trace there of William R. Lenhard II. Kent Lenhard backs that up.
He never got a doctorate.
In February 2010, William Lenhard began the process to file for bankruptcy in the state of Nevada. In a box where he was required by the court to disclose any patents he owned, he marked none. He was behind on payments on a 2005 Honda minivan. He owed about $60,000 on 8 credit cards. He claimed he received no income from employment or the operation of a business. His only income was $6,000 a month he received from his family. It looks like Shirley Blackplume and others are going to be disappointed.
I have my voucher at home, but I haven't got my computer yet.
That was a wild story. Well, more than 1,000 people on Blood and Siksika Reserve signed up for that. Most are still waiting for their computers, and housing promises seem to have been all but forgotten. Court records show that Lenhard sold the policies to a company called Diversified Settlement Fund for more than $5 million US. But then the company discovered that the policies had been canceled by the company that originally issued the policies. This one called 5 Star Insurance is based in Nebraska. A decision by the Nevada Bankruptcy Court stated that 5 Star's concerns were related to the fact that some of the individuals who were covered by the policy didn't even exist, and that a number of applications had signatures that appeared to be identical in handwriting. So when DFS realized that they had paid more than $5 million for worthless, non-existent policies, they sued in Canada and in the U.S. They alleged fraud. The court was convinced and ordered Lenhard to repay that money. Lenhard, though, said he had already spent it. He tried to declare bankruptcy to escape that debt. That failed. The court ruled that he could not escape repaying that money and that he'd received through fraud, but no money has actually been repaid as of yet. Lenhard appears, though, to be out of business. We need to take another break, but we've got more updates still ahead, including food insecurity in the north, and one of the most beloved characters on an Investigates show, Maddie, will tell you how he is doing. Stay with us. Welcome back. This story hit the heartstrings. Maddie has multiple disabilities, was aging out of foster care, basically being abandoned by the government, leaving his foster family on the hook for outrageous costs. And then also, what do we do with him? How do we help him? Kathleen Martens had that story for APTN Investigates. It's called For the Love of Maddie. Let's take a look back at that.
Chris Gardiner and his wife Shannon get Matthew Brandon ready for his school. They keep Matthew on a tight schedule. Matthew, or Maddie to his friends, is the Gardiner's foster son. He's 6 feet tall, 250 pounds, and 23 years old.
You pull up every day. Good job. Hold on. Big boy. Big boy. Big.
But he functions at the level of a toddler.
You can see too, always has his machine in his hands. So in addition to dressing him, it's like there's the that obstacle as well.
He has been diagnosed with autism, fetal alcohol syndrome, cerebral palsy, and occasional seizures. He doesn't go anywhere without his portable DVD player.
This is probably the coolest thing of all. Maddie, remember? Look, your talking stick. Whoever holds it will speak truth. We got it for him thinking it may be the first time he'll speak to us. We thought, okay, maybe he's just been missing the stick. So it's kind of just sitting there waiting for the day.
Maddie can't speak or likely remember his birth on a Manitoba reserve. He was put in foster care at 18 months after his mother moved to Regina. He lived in half a dozen foster homes before moving in with the Gardiners when he was 6.
Should we go? Want to gather up your things? You did great. You did great.
Yeah, press play.
Come. Yeah, come sit.
They've been a family for 15 years. But the Gardiners say everything you see here is threatened by the very people who put Maddie in their home in the first place. The Saskatchewan Ministry of Child and Family Services want to move Maddie into a group home.
I think that it's sick, really. It's sadistic. Sadistic that someone could knowingly get involved in a game like this and then inflict it on people.
Baby, hi! What happened to your cheek?
Yeah, I was a bump last night.
Oh, yeah?
They also have Maddie, who they say is still recovering from a bad experience at a group home where he stayed for a trial period.
Because the minute I saw Matthew, of course, I'm like, what happened? We were scared, you know, like Matthew gets in the car, Chris and I are sitting in the front seat, we're looking at him and he's literally holding on to, because he sits directly behind the passenger seat, and he's pulling the seat like, go, go, go. And we just remember looking back at him and with tears in our eyes and going, you're never going back. We'd had him since 1997.
Shannon says it took years to develop their trusting relationship. Something she says shift workers at a group home can't match.
If Matthew feels threatened, his trust is eroded, all of these things, you're going to wind up with a feral individual. And if you don't know him well enough, he'll just regress and regress and regress. And our fear, as dramatic as it might sound, is he would die.
Shannon says it took years to develop their trusting relationship. Something she says shift workers at a group home can't match.
If Matthew feels threatened, his trust is eroded, all of these things, you're going to wind up with a feral individual. And if you don't know him well enough, he'll just regress and regress and regress. And our fear, as dramatic as it might sound, is he would die.
Documents shared by the Gardiners show government watchdogs they consulted sided with the ministry. The Office of the Saskatchewan Ombudsman referred questions to children's advocate Bob Pringle. He said his hands were tied.
What can you tell me about your recommendations in that case?
I can't tell you anything about my recommendation in that case because I don't have the ability to talk about individual advocacy cases.
Pringle did confirm most of the complaints to his office were about...
You've stayed in contact with this family. That's like a decade ago, right?
Yep.
How's Maddie doing? How old is he now? How's his family doing? Did they get help?
Right. Well, he's 30 now.
I can't believe that.
And, you know, he watches that doc a lot. And that's how he knows who I am, is because of my voice in the doc. So when he sees me, he doesn't know me, but he's like, oh yeah, I know that voice. So they are still battling the bureaucracy. That story exposed one of their bigger battles. Now they still have little battles. If anyone watching knows, when you deal with a bureaucracy, they always come up with new ways to block you from this or that. And that's what's happening to them too.
And he's still getting some care, right? Like they're providing some respite for his parents.
Well, he was in this day program, which is super important for socialization. Yeah. And now the facility is saying that they can't handle him anymore, and that's really a big problem for his foster parents, who already have him 24/7, right? He doesn't live in a facility, he lives with them. Yeah. And so they're trying to find a way to circumvent that. The money to go to the day program is at issue, and as well transportation involved. So it's like they got this big thing that you saw in the dock handled, and now there are these other smaller fires. They're always putting out fires, I guess is the best way to describe it.
There's always room for, if you take somebody out of a loving home and stuff them in a group home, though. There's always money for that. There's money.
There's a bed waiting for him in a group home.
Of course.
And if you watch the doc, you could see he couldn't handle it in a group home.
No.
He's not a functioning adult, or even a functioning child. He needs hands-on care. He needs routine. And he needs his foster parents.
And he's loved, you know, keep him with his, what can we do to keep him happy and to keep you happy and to make this work while you're loved? That story was a finalist for a Canadian Association of Journalists Awards. It was incredible. This next story that we're going to take a look at too, while I have you here, was also nominated, was also shortlisted. This is a story, it was a bombshell called Wasting Away. It revealed that government-subsidized food in the North was being thrown out rather than marked down so people could afford it. Perfectly good food. So people would meet the grocery truck at the dump to get their food. It was just outrageous. Take a look.
It's an image you'll never see on a postcard, greeting you from Canada's Arctic.
We're in Canada. We're in Canada. Not in Venezuela, not Africa, Canada. And we're treated this way? Thank you very much.
Have you been to the dump yourself and seen that? Seen people there?
Yep.
And who did you see? Young, old, families? Who did you see?
Families. Their mother, their child, and their dad, and like somewhere else in the dump. Looking for food.
Rankin Inlet overlooks picturesque Hudson Bay. Further along the shore is where the Arctic community dumps its garbage. Here you can find people looking for building material, truck parts, even children's toys. And some come scavenging for food.
Sky-high prices are a fact of life in Nunavut because of the added cost of shipping everything up from the south.
How much does it cost you to buy a week's worth of groceries?
Close to 400.
And how many people is that for?
Just for me and my husband, we're only two.
Weeb says she can never get on top of it financially, and she's always worrying about her next meal. Today, we call this type of poverty food insecurity. It means living in a state of being without reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable, nutritious food. Another load from the Rankin Inlet garbage truck.
Is it from the Northern?
Dumps the most expensive food in Canada at our feet.
Okay, so these are already reduced. Dozen hamburger buns. Best value white bread. The Northwest Company.
Expensive not only to buy, but because these groceries are heavily subsidized by taxpayers. About 60 million tax dollars a year are paid to companies that operate food stores in Canada's Arctic under the Harper government's Nutrition North program. Retailers are supposed to use the funds to lower their shipping costs and then reduce the price on food the government says is nutritious.
You know, we're still seeing outrageous food prices in the North, so what changed as a result of that?
Well, you know, after that story ran, it shocked Canadians, especially here in the South, right?
Totally.
That, what? It's so expensive? What? You have to go to the dump? I mean, yeah, yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
So, you know, this program, the Harper government brought it in response to what retailers wanted, not what consumers wanted.
Right.
And so it works for retailers. It reduces the shipping costs, which are exorbitant, to get it from the south to the north. But the money goes into the retailers' pockets. So as a consumer, you're standing there in the store and you have to trust the retailer is knocking off a sufficient amount that you're going to be able to afford it. Like there we saw milk was $20.
Yeah.
They took $10 off for shipping. You're still paying $10 for 4 liters of milk. What are you going to buy instead? You know, pop costs you $1.
Right.
So what happened is then when the Liberals came in, instead of hearing from the consumers who don't want this program, it's not working, they did a big study.
Of course they did.
And then they added more money.
Of course they did.
To add a few more products. And then they added, expanded it to more communities.
Well, that's at least good.
Yes. But what they didn't add was things that is in every Nunavummian's cupboard, which is stuff when they have to go out on the land hunting or fishing to get their country food, so something they don't have to necessarily pay for, they can't buy in the store. They don't have those staples covered under Nutrition North. Now it's supposed to be nutritious, but I mean they want things like coffee, tea, coffee whitener, baking powder, flour, toilet paper, paper towels, canned meat. You know, just the staples that you need every day when you can't afford to buy stuff in the store or you're going to go out hunting.
Yeah.
Something else that's really expensive up there is dog food. Let's say you have dogs like sled dogs.
Right.
You know, not everyone can afford seal meat or whale meat to give them. Like you've got to, if you're a good hunter or know where the hunters are, you can get that stuff for your animals.
Yeah.
But if you're buying dog food, it's like $150 a bag.
And then it's not covered.
And then you saw on the dock, right? There were these on sale priced goods that weren't sold.
Yeah.
And now they're saying, don't even reduce them. Just give them away. Because you already got the subsidy for it.
Well, I hope that people still aren't having to go to the dump. We've run out of time here updating some of your favorite APTN Investigates documentaries. We're so thankful that you could join us. Thank you, Kathleen, one of the OGs of the Investigates unit along with me. We are going to be back to next week on child welfare. Lots to cover there. We'll see you then.